I want to make sure that everybody understands this. Grassroots America, We the People, supports legal immigration. People who will use the 29 different ports of entry that are legal ports of entry for the state of Texas. Texas has more legal ports of entry than any other state in the United States. There are 29 legal entry points. Those are the entry points that should be used to enter the United States. I also want to say that we do not fault the men and women of U.S. Border Patrol, the men and women that are on the ground. We don't fault the Department of Public Safety, the Rangers, the game wardens, the sheriffs, the National Guard when they get there. We don't fault them. It is the failure of leadership in Washington and the bureaucracy to fulfill the obligations to secure our border. So I just want to make sure that you all understand that we support law enforcement. And part of the reason that I am doing this is because I so much support law enforcement. They are being used as political pawns and props for political expediency, and it's wrong. It's wrong to do that to the United States military, and it's wrong to do it to law enforcement. And so as we go through this, you remember the video you saw. Okay. The name of my presentation here is The Great Betrayal, and I define that as the smoke and mirrors, the dog and pony shows, and the slick political posturing that equals a dangerous, wide-open border with Mexico. And for those of you who don't know me very well, you're going to find out that I'm very, very direct. This is a serious issue here. And as we go through these presentations today, you will see that your life, your liberty, and your property is in jeopardy because your government has failed you. Now, somebody that wants to take that out of context and wants to say, well, Joanne Fleming is anti-government, you better believe I'm anti-big government that fails to uphold the United States Constitution. Okay. The first slide here is the Rio Grande Valley sector. The part that is on the border represents 320 miles of 1,254 miles of the Rio Grande River. That is the Texas border with Mexico. In 2012, we tied with Tucson, which is the busiest and most deadly border crossing in the United States. So the DPS surge, as you look at this, you need to understand the DPS surge and the majority of the border agents in Texas are concentrated in this one sector. Okay? The next is the Laredo sector. It represents 171 miles on a river out of 1,254 miles, and it is the fourth busiest sector based on apprehensions. And you will notice that the Laredo sector goes all the way up to Dallas. That's important for you to remember because the Department of Public Safety has rated Dallas-Fort Worth as a major command and control center for 6 of the 8 most dangerous cartels in the world, Dallas-Fort Worth, and they are a little bit of a distance from the border. So this affects more than just the border counties and cities. Now, I was in the Laredo sector and in the Rio Grande Valley sector. I'm not going to go into a lot of those details today because on August 21st and the 22nd, when Brandon is here, you will get a full story of that. But I just want you to see this because the Laredo sector, according to Border Patrol, has giant gaps in it. This is a picture of a Border Patrol officer standing on the Rio Grande River banks on the Texas side, and he is by himself. I can't begin to tell you the number of times that we encountered border agents completely by themselves. It's dangerous for them. I would ask you to pray for them and their families. The U.S. border agents, and when they talk about giant gaps, it means agents often have no ability to call for backup. Areas are left without agents assigned to patrol. When agents do respond to alerts, they are regularly alone in the field with little to no access to cell or radio communication. They have poor, defective, insufficient equipment. You think about the billions of dollars that our federal government wastes studying the mating habits of gnats and everything else, and really, you know, conducting surveys and studies that tell people that men and women are different. You think of the number of things that they spend are on issues, corporate welfare, that is outside of the constitutional limits. And they can't equip the people that are supposed to be guarding our borders. Because you remember what James O'Keefe said, right on the Border Patrol website you will see that they talk about their purpose is to keep terrorists from coming into these United States. And I can tell you that the border agents we talk to describe to us the ways in which their equipment is defective. And I'm not gonna go into that here because frankly, this is being live streamed. It's gonna be archived, and I don't want to tell people, and I'm sure the criminals know more about their defective equipment than I do, but I don't want to put them in additional harm. But it is a shame on our government to leave these men and women exposed like this. By the way, they are eager to tell you that the state of Texas does provide excellent equipment for its Department of Public Safety officers, the rangers, and the game wardens who are down there on the border. I saw it firsthand, and they do have excellent equipment. What will the 1,000 National Guard personnel do? They're not yet deployed. Governor Perry has asked for them on a volunteer basis. And as of yesterday, about 2,200 men and women have volunteered to go to the border. Governor Perry stated, the state's deployment of troops and the funding of Operation Strong Safety is intended simply as a stopgap measure until the federal government steps in.
Never happened.
When do you think that's going to happen? It's not going to happen.
Hell freezes up.
It is not clear that all of the 1,000 National Guard personnel will actually be troops. Because you see, there's a whole lot of record keeping that's involved in an operation like this. So I want you to understand the facts here. There's a little bit of a difference. In fact, there's a great difference between some of the political rhetoric that you hear on Fox News, and I told you I'm straight on this, because you know what? Your lives and the lives of Texans and the lives of law enforcement are on the line here, so you need to know the truth. We need to get this thing defined. So it's not clear that everybody that will be sent will actually be troops. You know, when the word troop is used, I envision people suited up with guns with bullets in the guns. Yeah. All right?
Yeah.
That's what I think when I think about troops. That's not what we have. Governor Perry refused to provide specifics on numbers, the time frame, and the tactics, saying they did not want criminals to have that information. But you see, the mission charge was actually made public last week in a hearing in the Capitol, and I was sitting right there. So let's see what was said in that hearing that will tell you something about the mission. In the Texas House Committee on Homeland Security and Public Safety, which was August 5th, 2014, I was sitting there waiting to testify. Adjutant General John Nichols, who's in charge of the National Guard effort, said, when asked by the chairman to define the mission, what you've been told to do, he said, on the record, you can see it in its archived video, what we've been asked to do specifically is to come support DPS in their Operation Strong Safety. He stated that the state of Texas has not asked the National Guard to detain suspected undocumented immigrants. And when I say the state here, I'm talking about the governor. My command to my folks is avoid confrontation. Our rules of engagement are really rules of non-engagement. Now, did y'all get that? I have to tell you that the grassroots leaders that were sitting with me in that hearing, we nearly came up out of our chairs when we heard that. Because have you heard that before? Is that what your impression was, that that's what we were doing by sending the National Guard? Okay. If undocumented immigrants try to turn themselves into National Guard troops, he said, the soldiers are instructed to ask them to sit down and wait for Border Patrol or DPS agents to arrive. Now I submit to you that the people who live in Virginia and Arizona, let's see where else, maybe Rhode Island, some of those people are concerned about an open border. When they see Governor Perry, and again, I don't have a personal animus toward Governor Perry, but he's in a pretty important position. He's the chief executive officer of our state. He has broad executive authority over law enforcement. And where I come from, words mean things. When we say, by golly, when the federal government's not going to secure the border, but in the state of Texas we're going to, I don't expect to hear the Adjutant General say our rules of engagement are really rules of non-engagement. I don't expect to hear that. So what is happening here is Texas is actually participating in Obama's catch and release policy for illegals with some pretty failed results. This is a picture of Border Agent Vega, who was murdered on August the 3rd by two illegals who had been deported multiple times. He was gunned down in cold blood while he was out on an outing, a fishing expedition with his parents, his wife, and his children. And they saw him murdered by these two thugs. There's a price being paid here. And if you talk to law enforcement like we do all the time, they will tell you that the assaults on border agents, on DPS, are escalating. We've gone too far here. All officers are in danger because bullets don't follow jurisdictional lines. They don't. So if a bullet can get Border Agent Vega, it can get some of our DPS officers and some of our rangers and some of our game wardens. And I submit to you, they are real people with real families who love them and care about them. And how dare our government use them without giving them what they need, the orders they need to do the job. As I said, there are 29 legal ports of entry in Texas, and about 18 of those are bridges. You see that. There are plenty of ways to come over the border illegally. I submit to you, we need to stop tolerating the illegal entry. Now, this is important because you've heard me say over and over and over again that there are two reports that need to be considered. They're written by DPS, given to the legislature. I have to tell you, I encounter too many elected officials who don't even know these reports exist. And they're very important. They are posted on our website. One is the 2013 threat assessment that goes into the cartel activity and the transnational gangs that have set up elaborate, sophisticated networks all over the state of Texas. The other one is the gang assessment report that came out in April 2014. I want you to look at the dark blue there, that is the highest gang activity. You see down there on the border, you see the clusters there of where the high gang activity is. Then you see some in the Houston area. Then you see up there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Then you see that dark blue county that's in East Texas. That's Smith County. So I submit to you, the next time you have a conversation with elected officials who don't seem to really care that much about law enforcement, you might remind them that there's an important report that they need to look at that will tell you what our local PDs and Sheriff's Department and the DPS who work here, they encounter dangerous criminals all the time. We don't live in Mayberry anymore. We need to stop pretending that we do. And Grassroots America is going to work with local law enforcement to bring community education on this issue. We've been talking about getting some DEA agents here, some people who can define for you what that activity looks like and what you need to be aware of and how you report it and how you stay safe. Beautiful East Texas also has, you see this area here? That's the territory that the La Familia cartel works in, covers Smith County, and the Zetas cartel, and the Gulf cartel. We don't live in Mayberry anymore. So this is where we are today. It's a quote by Winston Churchill. The era of procrastination, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients, of delays is coming to its close, and in its place we are entering a period of consequences. Folks, we are about to enter the dire consequences because we've had too much political correctness and too many people who spit on the United States Constitution. So this weekend we're having a Gulf Coast Summit on the border crisis. 75 grassroots leaders will meet Saturday with a Texas Ranger and others with direct knowledge of this crisis. An action plan for Texas has been written by myself and Dale Hulse of the Clear Lake Tea Party. We will present that action plan for group endorsement. It's going to include much of what Representative Schaefer will tell you today. The status quo is unacceptable because, quite frankly, the status quo is deadly. Now, I've talked to you about the 80% of the problem. Colonel McCraw, head of DPS, says that the vast majority of people coming over the border are not the children. I'm talking to you about dangerous people, and I hope that you will take this very, very seriously. Thank you. Matt Schaefer.
Thank you, Joanne, for keeping everybody informed. And I know you all have been tuned into Breitbart, Texas, and other news outlets that have been reporting a lot of the details. One of the things I want to convey to you is that the reason that Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador and Mexico are in the situation. What do I need to do?
You're blocking the screen.
Blocking the screen. I'm tall. Sorry. The rule of law has failed in those countries. So the response to lawlessness is not further lawlessness. The response to lawlessness is to uphold and adhere to our sacred legal documents and those inalienable rights that were given to us by God and embodied in the Constitution. So bottom line up front, it is bad, and there is no end in sight. But let me tell you, we have some things that we can do. We have things we should do. We have a legal framework in which to operate. Our game wardens, our DPS troopers, our local law enforcement officials, our Texas National Guard have the legal authority to arrest illegal aliens crossing the border for violation of federal criminal statutes. But then they must then turn them over to the feds. Okay? That's under our current legal framework. We are doing a better job The DPS surge is beneficial. The Texas National Guard surge will be beneficial, but we can do a lot more. And we need more manpower, equipment, and more courage. Our Constitution does give us some options, but I believe that option is untested, but it's there. I want to talk about it. All right, so I'm going to go through some facts and some myths that I've encountered in all my many discussions. And let me tell you, I have made myself a nuisance in the offices of our statewide leaders. I was gone for a couple of weeks doing my Navy duty, and my wife said, "There's nobody in the living room yelling about the border." First myth that I've heard: crossing the border without papers is a federal civil matter. That is a myth. Fact: it is a federal crime to cross the border without official authorization. What happens, that is a crime to come across the border. Once that person is arrested by a lawful entity, it does trigger essentially an administrative process under the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. But it is a crime. What does the law say? 8 United States Code, section 1325, improper entry by an alien. First offense, 6 months in prison is an option. Second offense, 2 years in prison is an option. That is federal law on the books right now. Crossing the river without papers is a federal crime. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not. And the Border Patrol agents will tell you that as well when you talk to them. Our immigration laws are complex. Indeed they are. We have different immigration rules for people from different parts of the world. We have different rules for people who've been here on a visa and maybe it's expired. There are times perhaps that you could have a visa, work visa or something that's expired and they haven't gotten back to it. That may not be a criminal matter, but it is complex. Myth: the Texas National Guard cannot arrest or detain illegal aliens on the border. You know how many times I've yelled at Fox News? I got into Britt Hume when we were talking about the Texas Guard going down the border. Britt Hume was on there. Well, they can't arrest anyway, they can't detain. I got on Twitter and found his Twitter handle and started tweeting him that you're wrong, and he responded. And I got into a Twitter exchange with Britt Hume saying they can detain. Yes, they're going to have to turn them over to federal authorities, but they absolutely can detain and arrest. Now, here's the fact. The Texas governor has the constitutional and statutory authority under Texas law and the U.S. Constitution to order them to arrest for a federal crime. Now, he has ordered them to deploy, but obviously he has not ordered them, given them the order to take that action. The law, what's the Texas law say in the government code? Right there, the governor may call state military forces to assist civil authorities, and they can help with executing law as the public interest or safety requires. Does anybody doubt that we are clearly within a public safety and a public interest situation? Don't let anybody tell you that we don't have the authority for the governor to go further. Myth: Supreme Court ruled in Arizona v. U.S. that the state law enforcement cannot arrest illegal aliens for violation of federal immigration crimes. That is not what happened in the Arizona case. What the Supreme Court did in the Arizona v. U.S. case was that they struck down Arizona's new law, which created new criminal statutes at the state level that the Supreme Court said reached into the federal government's immigration responsibilities under the Supremacy Clause. But it also said police can still arrest for existing federal immigration crimes. And you've heard sheriffs from Arizona get on Fox News and Greta and others talk about, yes, we still can do that. In fact, we have a duty to ask about immigration status if we have a reasonable suspicion and turn them over to the feds, but the feds aren't doing anything. So what's the law? Right there, straight out of the Supreme Court's ruling, they have not prohibited state law enforcement from enforcing federal crimes, existing federal immigration law. Texas can do more. Listen, there's been a lot of talk about the kids. That's appropriate. How can we not talk about it? But really, in sheer numbers, the problem is the adults. It's the influx of adults. It's the cartel activity that is just exploding. And most of the kids that are coming through really are teenage males. There are some younger children, but the largest number are the teenage males. What can we do? We need more boots on the ground, more boats and more personnel on the river, along the river. There are so many things that we can actually do. Let me tell you, most of these people don't want to get caught. Okay? I know a lot of them are turning themselves in, but the majority of them, they still fear apprehension for one reason or the other. So we need to put more people, literally, along the river to man the observation posts. We have Humvees in our table and organization of equipment at the National Guard. We have Humvees with sensors that can get out of the rough country. I just got back from El Paso, where a large port of entry is there. Let me tell you, talk to the Border Patrol commander. All these 18-wheelers that come through in, conducting trade and commerce that we want, they are only able to x-ray a fraction of it, a small fraction of it. Yet, even when they're doing that, they find large loads of heroin, of drugs, of all these sorts of things. So I asked the commander, I said, why don't you have more capacity to x-ray more trucks? He said, we've actually have less capacity than we had a few years ago because some of the equipment we have has become obsolete. And so I'm sitting here thinking, you know what? The state of Texas could step up and purchase some more extra equipment and help out the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol agent also told me that although the traffic has increased, their personnel and their manning has stayed flat. So do you think that we're actually, even in the lawful ports of entry, are we doing what we can to interdict all the drugs and the paraphernalia and the illicit items that are coming through? We're not. We need more game wardens out in the brush where they know how to operate. We need more DPS troopers on the roads. We're going to have to hire and pay for these folks. Above the river, Joanne keeps talking about these Border Patrol agents who are alone. They covet helicopter support. We actually, in one of the Blackhawks that is going to be deployed with the National Guard right now, we have a quick reaction force team. We have guys that are trained to fast rope into remote locations to assist agents or DPS troopers that are out in the brush and don't have access. Cell phone signals don't always work out there. Helicopter assets are so valuable. But let me tell you something. What we could do is if we gave the funding, we could go to Arkansas and Oklahoma and other states that have pilots and they have helicopters that would love to come over. If we could pay for it, they would come over and help us support us with their helicopters. Another problem we have is that the helicopters that we have are Department of Defense assets, and the Department of Defense tries to pull them back sometime. We need more Texas-owned helicopter assets. Eyes in the sky, planes and UAVs. Right now, the FAA is not giving us authority to fly unmanned aerial vehicles along the border. I'd do it anyway. Let them sue us. Welfare, benefit, integrity. Ultimately, we're going to have to start doing some things that sends a different message back to Mexico. I'll give you an example. In 2012, the state of Massachusetts, on their food stamp cards, said it's going to have your photo ID on it. Because they got tired of people passing these food stamp cards off as currency. It's happening here. They get to the end of the month, it's got a couple $100 left on it, they sell it for cash. Well, we could slow that down a little bit. If Massachusetts, one of the most liberal states in the country, can put photo ID on their food stamp cards, why can't we in Texas? Policy is going to have to change. The only way this is going to stop is if when people either show up to the river and they are deported quickly or they can't even get across. That message has got to go back to Central America and to Mexico. We're going to have to have meaningful deportations, and the cartels are going to have to feel some pain. But what is that going to require? It's going to require a change in federal law. You've heard about the 2008 law that treats Central Americans different than it treats Mexicans. Okay, they are under a different legal rubric. We've got to change that. But let me tell you something. It's not going to happen anytime soon. I have no faith in that whatsoever. And let me tell you, our state leaders, when you talk to them behind closed doors and to their staff, they don't think it's going to happen anytime soon either. They realize that help is not coming from the federal government. So what if it doesn't stop? What if this continues? Let me tell you, the numbers are relatively lower than they were earlier on the apprehensions. It's still bad. Judd Quarles, my chief of staff, just got back from border tour and said the apprehensions last week were still up over around 6,000, I believe. The DPS told me that for every one that's apprehended, 2 are getting across. And remember, the apprehensions, that 6,000, this is essentially catch and release. They are being given a piece of paper saying report to a court hearing. It's being ignored wholesale. The deportations are a very, very small fraction of what's happening. So what do? We act on our own and we test new constitutional ground. The founders gave us a way out. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3. You can defend yourself if a state feels like it's in imminent danger, as will not admit of delay. How quickly are we getting there? How quickly? So, if I'm governor for a day, what do I start thinking about doing? Go on offense. Use a Texas security force to operate inside Mexico against the cartels and the coyotes. I'm talking about raising the cost of doing business for them. Let me tell you, we can do this covertly, we can do it overtly, we could do it with, let me tell you, we have smart military folks with a lot of experience. We could use intelligence to really only work when it was to our advantage and start making the cost of doing business for them and the human trafficking go way up. The Mexican state of Tamaulipas, across from the Rio Grande Valley, is ungoverned by the Mexican government. It is controlled by the cartels. And the cartels are even at war with themselves. When we say Mexican government do X, Y, and Z, they are incapable of that. You remember Juarez across from El Paso being such a problem in the news a while back, and now it's calmed down? When you ask the Border Patrol what happened, why did it calm down? They say, well, one cartel won. It's not because the Mexican government went in and cleaned house. It's ungoverned. I would create some kind of a buffer zone, strategic fencing, information ops. I would start doing some pretty sneaky information ops in Mexico and Central America. I'd start putting some leaflets in, some messages out that maybe told them it wasn't a good idea to come north. And let me tell you, this idea is going to be considered radical by some people. You've got to make the cost of doing business with the cartels go up. They are making a tremendous amount of money off of human trafficking right now. The people that are coming out from Central America and Honduras, they're not coming all by themselves. They have connections in the United States that many of them are using to pay the coyotes to bring them forward. You've got to change the message in Central America. What can you do as grassroots folks? Pray and trust God. Ask statewide leaders who are in executive offices, not just legislative offices, to begin to come up with specifics of what they're going to do. And then as the appropriations process moves forward in the Texas House and the Texas Senate, the proof will be in the money. What money do we step up and apply towards the security against the fundamental role of state government? And keep the heat on our federal officials as best we can. I'm going to leave you with this. Compassion, yes. Injustice, no. We have biblical mandate for that. In Exodus, it says, you must not oppress the foreign resident. We are to always provide mercy. But justice is there too. Do not show favoritism to a poor person in a lawsuit. God wants truth as we deal with the poor. God wants mercy as we deal with the foreigner. We've got to do both, or we, in the end, in the long run, if we ignore the laws of our nation, What message have we given to Central America, to Mexico, the places where, why don't they have foreign investment that keeps their economy going? Because the corporations are afraid of their assets being seized, because the cartels control, because the drug lords are there, because you can't do oil and gas business the way you should in a country where the law is upheld. We've got to turn the corner, folks. And let me tell you, we're going to keep making a nuisance of ourselves. We're going to keep spreading the message. We have a political problem in the state of Texas. We have a lot of our Democrat colleagues, they are not on board with this. I've talked to them. I've talked to border reps. They are not on board with this for various reasons. I don't want to take up all the time because I want to turn it over to my colleagues, but let me tell you something. We're going to keep pressing. We're going to keep pressing, and I'm going to trust in God that we're going to get some progress made on this.